Been 10 years now I've been on YouTube platform. It hasn't always been like this. I think back as a kid, I had two major influences. I've always loved cars. Always, always, always. It all started with a good old Uncle Ray of mine. He taught me basically how to use some of these big wrenches. We worked on a farm. We tore down tractors, trucks, trailers, you name it. I learned how to work very early on with my hands. And I loved mechanical items. I always loved things, tidbits, wrenches, sockets, you name it, nuts and bolts. If it turned, if it had mechanical gears, I always seemed to love it. I gravitated to that. So I always knew I had this passion. Then time went on, of course, always fixing cars around the house and doing little brake jobs, little minor repairs. I never formally got my ticket in that particular trade, but I constantly worked on it. As a matter of fact, I'd argue that I probably have more wrench time than a lot of modern mechanics that are working for some franchise dealers. I loved working on cars. On top of it, then, when I was little, I was a younger guy, I was in my teens, and you remember that poster, remember the Alpine poster of the Lamborghini Countach that they showed many years ago. It was at the stereo shop, and it was this infamous or famous red Lamborghini Countach, and I love that car with an absolute passion. When I saw that, I went there with my dad at that time, and I said, you know what, Dad, one day I'm going to have a car like that. I remember having that talk with my dad there years ago. We saw it in the store and said, one day I'll have a car like this. One day, I swear I'm going to do that. Because to me, I looked at that and it wasn't about, when you're young, when you're 12 years old, 10 years old, you're not thinking about the Joneses. You're not thinking about, having the shtick or having people look up to you. You're not thinking about having, showing off or being that you're not. You're thinking about what that car brings. When you're young, like I was at that time, you're thinking about, that car must be just exciting to drive. It makes crazy sounds. It looks absolutely out of this world. And that very first day that I saw that red Lamborghini, I told my dad, one day I'm going to have a car like that. That's where the beginning of my car passion came from. And as you could tell, it exudes all over the place. I constantly love fun cars. And I wish I could shake it. I really wish I could. There's times where I said, it would be a lot cheaper if I didn't have such a passion for cars. It would be easy to drive around in an old RAV4. It'd be cheap. It'd be affordable. It'd be easy. Now, there is a conversation to do with affordability and reliability, and we'll get to that in a second, because there was another very influential story of mine in my life that did actually lead me down that path. But initially, my baseline was I loved fun cars. I always have. I mean, that's why I've coined that term, life's too short to drive boring cars, because I truly, truly believe it. And I've always believed that throughout the years. I've always had fun cars. Here's the M5. I've always had something fun sitting over here as well. And it's always just, it's felt so right to have a fun car. Throughout all the years, I've had a variety of different Porsches and all kinds of fun cars throughout the years. And I always felt, not that I had to keep up, because it wasn't about that. It was really, realistically, it was more about having something that really engages the driving experience and the emotions that you get from driving these fun cars. So that's where this all started, this love and this passion for cars that a lot of people see today as more of an appliance. You see, they see a car as more of just an A to B. And while a car in its very basic form is a simple matter of transportation, absolutely. You get in, you close the door, you put on your seatbelt, you start the ignition, and away you go to your little job or to school or whatever it has be. But I saw it always as a little bit more than that. I always saw driving that daily car shouldn't necessarily have to be just very boring, mundane, ho-hum. I never thought about it in that terms, because even one of my first cars, I bought this little Mazda GLC. It was the first car I could afford. It wasn't really that fun to drive. It was a little gutless car, probably had 80 horsepower, but it had a manual gearbox, and I understood the premise of pulling gears, having some fun. Okay, well, time went on, not very much time, I might add, and I started to have these big eyes for fun cars. Along came my Fiat X19. Do you remember the little Bertone X19, little Italian sports car, removable roof, reliability of, a modern day Fiat? Pretty much about the same. I had all kinds of problems, electrical issues. I remember the gauge and it'd fluctuate. Pardon the, I'm having a tongue twister here today. But you get the tachometer would sit there and fluctuate, and then I'd give it a hit on the dash, and it would just pop back up. So it was one of those cars that I learned what it was like to have oil pan gasket leaks, to have blown heads and blown head gaskets. I had to get a lot of that work. Had to fix a lot of those problems with that car after numerous months and years of abuse, largely by me, because at the time I was really trying to make the best out of having a fun experience. And I drove the wheels. I destroyed that car. I'll be perfectly frank. But I also learned what it was like to drive a fun car, put a car literally almost on two wheels around a corner. And that's really where it started for me. So the experience, the visual aspect of seeing this Countach and then transferring that down to one of my first cars, that I felt that I could use it summer and winter. And I did. My little Fiat X19, I ended up putting winter rubbers on it, and I drove it summer, winter, all year round. Clearly not a great winter car, especially in snow when we get 2 feet of snow. But it was a car that I really, really admired because of its simplicity, its basic appeal. And that's where cars like the Miata have always appealed to me. Very basic, simple, but very fun to drive. Okay, time goes on. I get a little bit older. And this is sort of the other influential part of my history. Now, I always loved working on cars, but I never really thought about doing it for a living, okay? However, I had this aunt many, many years ago, and this was an absolute tragic story because this older aunt of mine, she had this car many years ago, very plain Jane. I think it was a Ford or a Chevy or something at that point. At that point, it doesn't really matter. And she was driving, she didn't have a lot of money. She was almost living from check to check, divorced, didn't have a lot of cash, and realistically did everything in her power just to keep food in the mouth of her and the young ones. But on top of it, had this car. Okay, this car she drove for a few years, and then lo and behold, boom, there was something strange. I just remember that from a distance. As a kid, I wasn't first person there, but I remember the story. And she took it into the dealership. And the dealer looked it over and said, "Oh, you've got a blown engine. So here's your option. Either A, scrap it, or we can take it off your hands and we'll absorb the cost of diagnosing it and you walk away scot-free. Or it's going to cost you $2,200 to put an engine in this thing. Possibly even $1,500 to rebuild it." Back then, that was a lot of years ago. So that's a lot of money by today's standards. I mean, we're talking back in the early 80s. And it was obviously a car that now she could no longer afford. And it was tragic because I saw the emotions. I saw the panic, the initial response, because I remember her coming to visit and hearing the conversations and the breakdowns and the emotions as she realized she didn't have the money, and also realized later on that, through a word of mouth, that they're not the only ones. After talking to the mechanic, it sounded like there was a bit of a common issue with that particular engine and that particular car. Now, from that moment, when I saw the tears, and when I heard about these issues of this car and the fact that people are still buying these cars knowing that there was some sort of chronic problem, that really irked me. I'll be perfectly honest. Irked me to the point where, no, I didn't necessarily want to work as a mechanic, but I definitely want to start thinking about, how can I help people? How can I help people avoid these problems? As I grew up, I was reading magazines, and I do a lot of ride-alongs, and I just really enveloped the whole car industry and car market as much as I could. I learned, I continued to wrench on relatives' cars and doing my own. But what I did start to learn was, there is not two cars that are the same. And there are some reliable cars and there's some absolute trash cars. And I've always felt this passion to help out those that were hard done by, like my aunt, who unfortunately, it wasn't no fault of anybody's other than the fact that it was a junky car and the engine blew up, and sounds like it wasn't a one-off. It was a bit of a consistent issue through a lot of different cars of that particular make and model. Now, with time went on. I went to school, went to engineering, I went into another field, and quite honestly, I went through, how many years of, earning income, buying a house, moving on, and, building a young family, and we loved our lives. Absolutely. No regrets there. However, later on in the career, I realized, there's this YouTube game, okay, this thing called YouTube. And a friend of mine, He was an engineer, electrical engineer. He introduced me to YouTube. Now, we all know YouTube. We all put on little funny cat videos, and it was one of those things that we all had fun with, just watch and browse for hours, watching long form content. Back when, it wasn't really that big of a thing. People just watched it to kill time. Now, this friend of mine showed me the ins and outs, told me how to get set up. And I realized, wait a minute, I have this passion. I have this passion for cars. I love cars. And not only fun cars, because I started making videos about exotic cars and fun cars. And you saw, if you watch the channel and go back to the beginning, 10 years ago when I started the channel, Exoticcar Playplace, it started with cars that were fun. Lambos and Ferraris and Porsches. And I still have that burning, yearning feeling for those cars. I love those cars, just like I love these cars. I will never, ever give up on that passion. Not that I want to or can. I mean, ultimately, like I said, it would be a lot cheaper if I just didn't drive these kind of cars. It would be a lot simpler for sure, and it would certainly put a little more money in the bank account. But I have this passion for these cars. And so the channel evolved. The channel evolved for one major reason. And it's not from a lucrative, it's not from a financial perspective. It's certainly not from a passion perspective, because that passion has always been there. But as you've known, you've probably noticed the channel transition for the last how many years here now. I've been doing this for 10 years, and the first few years was very much geared towards, pardon the pun, right? Pretty much geared towards, the fun cars, the cars that are pretty much not really the day-to-day drivers, but things that you could really have fun with on a Saturday night. And I really believe that, because life is too short to drive boring cars. However, those tears keep coming back in my mind, those tears. And every once in a while, I see that and I hear that. And I realize I have a voice. And I also have an ability to wrench on cars. And I've been fixing cars for decades, if I can say that. Now in my 50s, I've been fixing cars for years. Yes, it doesn't matter, from simple things like brake jobs and changing half axles to rebuilding engines to changing just about every aspect on a car. Yes, I've rebuilt engines. Yes, I've rebuilt parts of transmissions. Yes, I've done suspension work. I've done a full lift kit on I had a 1-ton diesel Ford F350 many years ago, and I did a full suspension lift. I think it was an 8 or 10-inch lift right on my driveway with hand tools and a floor jack, if you can believe that. Hence, why do I have big tools like this laying around? Because I'm willing to take on a challenge, and anything A, that saves me or others money, or B, makes a vehicle better and it doesn't cost you a ton of money. Hey, I'm game. Let's try it. That's why these fun cars are always exciting, because they're dynamic, they're interesting. And when I can customize or fix something, or a broken car that maybe something's leaking, I can take it apart, rechange the gaskets, clean everything up, put it back together, test it, fill it up, and it's fixed and it no longer leaks. That's a big win for me. And so I've learned to be like this over the years. And so the channel, as you've noticed, has developed from a place of pure passion to I haven't lost the passion, because a lot of you, I still continue with that intro, and it's very important. And I do believe if we don't have some passions in our lives, what do we have? If we don't have things that we love, whether it's golfing, whether it's cars, whether it's travel, it doesn't matter. You have a passion, exploit it. Cars were my passion, but also the passion were those tears. And so when I hear about people dealing with bad cars, junk cars, I'm going to talk about it, because not everybody wants to hear it. I'm also going to share some great cars, and you see the content is very much the best, the worst, the best this, the worst that. And I talk about these it's very much in its entirety, not because I like to hear myself talk. Rather, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've learned that there's more and more and more problems in the industry. There's complex cars, the development of new technology, things like we're hearing direct injection, turbocharging, CVT transmissions, small turbo 3-cylinder engines rather than V6s. All of these things over time have developed and increased the complexity of cars, ultimately meaning the end user is going to pay the price. And all I can keep thinking about are those tears of disappointment, those tears when the bank account was cleaned out to try to make that repair. It's devastating, and it's truly devastating for a lot of people. I'm not here to hear myself talk. I am here because I have a platform, I have a voice, And I have a passion for fun cars, but a passion for avoiding absolute junk and trying to, give people that guidance that they need. A lot of people need guidance, and that's fine. Sometimes, like they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So sometimes people will just do what they'll do. And sometimes cars are a compromise. Sometimes it's an extremely fun car, but maybe the reliability isn't that great. So then you got to ask yourself, where is that priority? And some people will say, I don't even care how reliable it is. It's amazing. I'm going to drive it. I get it. And I totally admit and agree. In a lot of ways, I've lived very much the same way. However, a lot of these fun cars, you'll notice, really are hovered around the idea of having a toy. Because most of these fun cars, you could daily drive a lot of these, but a lot of them are best suited for a Saturday night. A lot of you saw a few years ago, I had a 335 BMW. I loved it. It was manual. It was a turbo 6. It was tunable. And I had a lot of fun with it. I was daily driving it. And I was wrenching on it, it seemed like every single week. So it got to the point where the passion for the vehicle was outdone by the reliability issues. And so it was time to make it go away. But hence, I had a Lamborghini several years ago. That car had such spectacular presence, road presence, sound, the driving experience. Every time you open up the door, you get that waft of leather, and it was just the passion. Okay. Now the bonus was the Lamborghini Gallardo, what I had, was arguably one of the most reliable exotics on the planet. Same with the Huracan, same with the R8. Those are the most exotic or most reliable exotics you can find on anywhere, pretty much at any point. So I got into a good place. I had a good experience. I didn't have any reliability issues. I did put in a clutch, but we knew that, and I knew that was coming because that was sort of an issue with those cars. On growing chronically, they have weak clutches. Other than that, the car was bulletproof, and I had an absolutely rosy experience. And that continues on my journey of, life's too short to drive boring cars, because I truly believe you've got to have something fun. You do. If you're a car person, this is what it's about right here. However, to trump all of that, nobody wants to be broke or subject to repairs on your car. So this is why the channel is what it is. After 10 years, this evolution, I wanted to provide some clarity, because some people don't like my content. It offends people. Some people don't like the idea that I call out junk cars. Some people don't like the fact that I'm recommending this, but what about us? Some people get butthurt because I'm not giving the green light to their car, but instead I'm calling it out for other reasons. We're not here to do that. This isn't personal. This is literally me taking my knowledge, my experience, my understanding of the industry as a whole, and sharing it with all of you. And this platform that I've been hanging around on for 10 years has allowed me to, what I'll say is revolutionize the communication of reliability and quality in cars. Because there's a lot of channels that talk it, but ultimately, there's not a lot of channels that get into the depth that I do on such a broad spectrum of cars. You have channels that are right into the idea of like BMW. You have cars, brands that are right into, say, Audi or Hondas or Lexus. But those are all important. But you know what? From a consumer's perspective, not everybody's a brand loyalist. And some people just like to have options and look around. And so that's why I provide the most diverse level of knowledge and experience that I can pass along for affordable, reliable, and practical cars for your daily commute. All being said, we can't forget about that Saturday night cruiser. Not everybody has the kind of money that they would like to have two cars, a Saturday night driver and a daily. Okay, so you find a daily that's fun and fast. You want some examples? We've got some close friends of ours right now actually is rocking the latest B58 engine in an M340i. Perfect example of a great daily driver that's also fun to drive. See, you get it with the xDrive, it has all-wheel drive, and it's fun and it's fast. Okay, not everybody's a BMW fan. All right, how about something like a Lexus IS500? There's a Toyota product with serious performance, 470 horsepower. Or even better, the IS350 and the all-wheel drive allows you to drive it every day, all year round. So it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice reliability and fun at the same time. I mean, ultimately, they can live together and thrive. Now, if you do have the funds and you're okay with having a toy that sits for 300 days of the year and you bring it out for those special days, absolutely. Life's too short to drive boring cars. But to have a daily drive or two that gets you reliably at a low cost price point each and every day, that's what I'm also sharing with you, because it's important that we consider reliability. It's important that we consider some of the costs of maintenance and depreciation and all those things that really matter. Cost, inconvenience, stress. Those are all things that hit us when we least expect it. Nobody likes to lose family. Nobody likes to lose loss, a pet, right? But to lose a pile of money for a car repair, it's a loss. You could have been saving up for months, maybe years. All of a sudden, you've got 10 grand in the bank account. You're like, yes, I finally saved up. And then bang, an engine job just cost you 12 grand. So not only are your savings gone, now you have to take out a small loan to get the rest. That's how cars can be. And that's why I'm here to share my background with each and every one of you and hope that I can bring and shed some light as to what my last 10 years has been. This development, I pretty much said bye-bye to my career in engineering. I no longer have any part of that. I said adios. I retired from that and I am going full on. And you've got to understand that I am truly here to help each and every one of you because this is a passion. I don't take buyouts. People aren't buying me to advertise stuff. People aren't buying me to say good things. I don't have all these sponsors. That's not what I'm looking for. I turn sponsors away constantly. I get emails inundated with this, that, and the other. But I can't feel in my right mind share and advocate for a product that isn't well sorted, well tried and true, and something that I wouldn't even use myself. So please be sure to check that out. And of course, right there, hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you all real soon. Bye-bye.